The latest installment in the Fast and Furious franchise, Fast X, is finally available in theaters. And this is a spoiler-free review, so if you haven't watched the film yet, you are safe. In the film, we follow Dominic Toretto and his family who are being targeted by Dante, the son of a former Fast foe, Hernan Reyes. Fast X is directed by Louis Leterrier, with the screenplay and story being written by Dan Mazo and Justin Lin. And in the cast, of course, we have Vin Diesel returning, Michelle Rodriguez, Ludacris, Tyrese Gibson, Jason Statham, John Cena, Jordana Brewster. Honestly, it would take less time to tell you who isn't in this movie, The Rock, and of course, Paul Walker. But getting into some of the new cast members, as well as the characters they're playing, starting with the villain of the film, Jason Momoa playing Dante. This villain is a very different villain from the ones we've seen in other Fast and Furious movies. I will get to him a little bit more in a bit, but let's keep going. Some other newcomers, we have Brie Larson playing Tess and Alan Ritchson playing Ames. They both work for the Bureau or the agency. I forget exactly what the organization is called in these movies, but you know what I mean. And just because I'm not really going to say anything about them later, Brie Larson and Alan Ritchson, I think they both did a pretty good job in this film, but they didn't get that much to do, to be completely honest. Also amongst the cast, we have Daniela Melchior playing Isabella. She is a racer character. Yes, there are races in this movie. For once, we haven't had a race in a while, I feel like. There's a little bit more to her character that I can't really say here, but yeah, I like her in here. And the last person I want to mention is Leo Abelo Perry playing Little Brian. Little Brian, of course, being the son of Dominic Toretto. I have just a little bit more to say about him later, but I think he did a pretty good job in this movie. Now with the synopsis, the crew, and the cast out of the way, let's get into the review. Now I feel it's important to start by saying this, I am not a Fast and Furious fan. I like a good amount of the movies, but the further along they go, the less I like them, the more I want to see the franchise end. So I can't really say I was excited for this movie. I didn't have very high expectations going into it. And coming out of the movie, I gotta be completely honest with you, I got pretty much what I expected, which again, was not much. But that's not to say it's all bad. Before I get into the negatives, let's get into some positives. Starting with Jason Momoa as the villain Dante, I honestly think this is one of the best villains we've had in the entire franchise. I can't necessarily say his origin is the most original of the entire franchise, but his personality, his charisma, his humor, those are the things that make this character stand out above the rest. Jason Momoa absolutely steals the show, and he is an absolute treat in this movie. The second thing I really enjoyed about this movie is John Cena. Now when it comes to John Cena's character, Jacob Toretto, A, he doesn't look like Vin Diesel whatsoever. I don't buy them as brothers at all. And B, in Fast and Furious 9, I wasn't too crazy about his character. He was the villain, he was very serious, very stoic. And here they do a complete 180, he's almost a completely different character. John Cena is essentially being John Cena, very charismatic, very comedic. I paired him up with Little Brian in this movie, and the two of them together is such a fun duo. I like the little side story they go on. And like Jason Momoa, I think that John Cena stood out above the rest. The last positive thing I have to say is the action. Now there are some aspects of the action that don't work for me, I'll get to that in a sec. But for me personally, I like to see things go boom, I like to see cars go vroom vroom. So when it comes to a Fast and Furious movie, I feel like I'm getting what I want from it for the most part, as long as it's doing that. And of course the movie is doing that, because that's what all these movies do. But getting into the negatives, starting with the action, there is some action in here that really doesn't hold much weight. Whether it be because of the stakes, the characters are going to be fine, or it's because, the lack of physics and gravity. The crazier these things get, the less dangerous it seems for the characters, because they just keep surviving everything. I don't know, that's just me personally. These characters can die and come back, we've seen it before, so when those characters are in peril, you really don't feel as much anymore. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the action, but most of the CGI in this movie looks good, but there's a couple moments where it just looks god-awful. There's two scenes in particular I'm thinking of when I think of bad CGI in this movie, and one of them is not quite as big of a scene, but the other one is probably one of the biggest scenes in the movie. Definitely has me a little bit puzzled. I wonder if there were time constraints, or if the shots were really just that hard to do. I have no room to talk really. I imagine it's extremely hard work and takes a lot of time and effort. But I do feel like if you're going to have this big VFX shot, it's something you really got to take your time with, because again, this was a really big moment in the movie. Not going to spoil anything obviously, but one of the biggest moments in the entire movie, and the CGI is probably the worst it was in the entire film. No shade whatsoever to the VFX artists who worked really hard on it. I'm sure it was just time constraints, but the movie has a $340 million budget. I feel like these shots should be better than they are. But the next negative I want to talk about is with the writing, particularly the dialogue. I don't think the dialogue has necessarily been the strongest suit for these movies, but my god, I know there's a time when it was a lot better than this.
You will never be able to break my family.
But getting away from the dialogue, the last complaint I have is with the writing overall. I think the pacing kind of goes hand in hand with what I'm about to say, but with the writing of the film overall, it's very fast, no pun intended. You don't really take time to slow down for much. Right from the start, this movie is high energy, very fast paced, and it doesn't really stop until you get to the end. Which might be a good thing for some people, but for me personally, I just need a little bit more to latch onto with the story. It's a similar problem I had with John Wick Chapter 4. It was action 100% of the time, and the story felt like a bit of an afterthought. Same goes for this movie here, at least when it comes to a lot of the side characters. I don't think the stories they did with a lot of the side characters were that interesting, especially the stories with Tej and Roman. That little side adventure they went on didn't seem to add a whole lot to the movie. It basically seemed like it was there to say, hey, here's the characters, and also to fill time. Then there's the whole racing aspect with Dom and Dante. That seems to happen for what seems like no reason. There are some deeper elements to it that I didn't really think about until after I watched the movie. But for the most part, it really is just there to have a racing scene. And even more than that, it is there to have a racing scene in the trailers. And I guess this is just a wee bit of a spoiler, but the movie ends on a cliffhanger. For those of you who don't know, this was supposed to be the second to last of the Fast and Furious films, but now it looks like we're going to get 2 more after this.
And after the studio saw this part 1, they said, could you make Fast X, the finale, a trilogy?
You guys confirming right now that we're getting a third movie? Wait, did that just happen? Wait.
Cliffhangers aren't always the best thing for some people. Doesn't really bother me necessarily. It actually does make me excited to see what happens in the next one. But the little complaint I have there is how abruptly the movie ends. 2 very big things happen and then the credits just start to roll. By the way, there is a post-credit scene, so stay tuned for that, but there isn't anything after that one. But yeah, that ending is going to have people maybe a little bit confused, maybe a little bit angry, maybe feeling a little bit unsatisfied by the end, but hey, that just means we have to go watch the next one. But with the positives and the negatives out of the way, it is time to rank the movie. When it comes to my ranking, 2023's Fast X is a discounted ticket. There are definitely a lot of issues I have with this movie, probably a lot more issues that I could have talked about, but at the end of the day, like I said, this is pretty much what I expected from this movie. I wasn't expecting much, I didn't get much, so I'm not the most disappointed. In fact, I would say the performances from Jason Momoa and John Cena are the reasons I actually enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would. But those 2 aspects right there aren't necessarily enough to make this movie good in my opinion. But have you seen 2023's Fast X? Let me know down in the comments below without spoiling anything. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you in the middle? Have you not seen it? Are you planning on watching it anytime soon? Why or why not? Really, any comments you have for me, I would love to hear from you. I respond to as much as I can. But do me a favor and leave a like on this video, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can come to the family barbecue, and I will see you in the next one.